What if the world you are waiting for is not ahead of you, but already being shaped by the state you occupy right now? Most people try to receive love by chasing it, analyzing it, or hoping for it. But life does not respond to pursuit, it responds to assumption. The moment you accept something internally as true, your outer world begins reorganizing itself to match it. So instead of asking, "Do they love me?" the real shift begins when you ask, "Who am I being in my imagination right now?" If you are being the version of yourself who is chosen, adored, and deeply valued, then your thoughts, your inner conversations, and your emotional state will naturally align with that identity. And that identity becomes the cause. Acting as if they are madly in love with you is not about forcing an outcome in the physical world. It is about occupying the state where that love is already a settled fact within you. In your imagination, you no longer negotiate it, you no longer question it, you live from it. You hear their voice differently. You feel their presence differently. You see yourself through the eyes of someone who is already cherished, and in that inner certainty, something powerful happens. Your subconscious accepts it as reality, and what the subconscious accepts, it expresses outwardly. Do not be distracted by present appearances. Appearances are delayed echoes of past assumptions. If you change the assumption now, you change the echo that must follow. So persist in the feeling, not occasionally, but as a natural way of being. When doubt appears, you do not argue with it. You simply return to the version of you who already has it. Because in the end, love is not something you chase. It is something you occupy within yourself first. And when you consistently act, feel, and imagine as though you are already deeply loved, life has no choice but to reflect the state you are living from. It is already done in the only place it ever begins within. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a way of describing how inner life quietly shapes outer events. Every person is constantly assuming something about themselves, about others, and about life itself. These assumptions are not always spoken, but they are always felt. And what is felt repeatedly begins to form the structure of your experience. An assumption is more than a passing thought. A thought comes and goes, but an assumption is a settled position of mind. It is what you accept as true without needing constant proof. For example, if someone assumes they are not valued, they will begin to interpret neutral situations as rejection. If someone assumes they are chosen, they will naturally interpret the same situations as confirmation of love and connection. The outer world may look unchanged at first, but the inner lens has already shifted, and that lens determines what is noticed, ignored, or magnified. This is why assumption is called the seed. A seed does not immediately show the full tree. It works silently underground first. It restructures itself, gathers energy, and then eventually breaks through the surface. In the same way, your assumptions begin invisibly. They work in the background of your mind, shaping your emotions, reactions, expectations, and decisions. Over time, these internal movements become visible circumstances. What you consistently assume becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar becomes reality. The mind does not resist repetition, it accepts it. If you repeatedly assume lack, confusion, or distance, your mind normalizes that state. If you repeatedly assume clarity, love, and alignment, your mind begins to normalize that instead. Familiarity is powerful. It becomes the foundation from which you perceive everything. This is why inner persistence matters more than external evidence. External reality is only a reflection of what has already been accepted internally. If you wait for the world to change before you change your assumption, you are essentially waiting for the reflection to adjust before changing the mirror. But when the assumption shifts, the reflection has no choice but to follow in its own timing. To live consciously is to become aware of the assumptions you are embodying throughout the day. Not to fight them, but to notice them. And once noticed, gently return to the state you choose to occupy. Because assumption is not about force, it is about occupation. You live from it, not toward it. Over time, your inner world becomes so stable that outer circumstances lose their power to define you. You begin to realize that experience is not happening to you randomly. It is unfolding from you through the assumptions you maintain. And when this understanding settles deeply, life feels less like something you are trying to control and more like something you are learning to direct from within. In that realization, assumption is no longer just a concept. It becomes the quiet creative force behind everything you experience, moment by moment, day by day, reality by reality. This idea points directly to the hidden conversation that is always happening within you. Before you ever speak to someone in the physical world, you have already spoken to them internally. You have already formed impressions, expectations, and emotional meanings in your mind. And this inner dialogue becomes the unseen script that your outer experience tends to follow. Your inner dialogue is not just random thinking, it is a continuous stream of interpretation. When you think about a person, you are not only recalling facts, you are assigning meaning. You decide, often unconsciously, whether they are distant or close, loving or indifferent, available or unavailable. And once this meaning is accepted internally, it begins to shape how you feel in their presence, even before they do anything. Feeling is important here, because it is not only what you think, but how you feel about what you think that creates momentum. If your inner dialogue carries uncertainty, anxiety, or fear, those emotions subtly influence how you show up. And that shift in your energy is often what others respond to. Not because they are reading your mind, but because they are responding to the version of you that your state is projecting. In this way, relationships are not only external interactions, they are mirrors of internal conversation. If your inner dialogue consistently tells you that someone is distant, you may begin to act guarded, less expressive, or more doubtful. And that change in behavior often leads to exactly the distance you were imagining. On the other hand, if your inner dialogue assumes warmth, connection, and ease, you naturally relax. You become more open, more aligned, and more present. That version of you invites a different response. This is why inner dialogue is so powerful. It sets the tone before reality even has a chance to respond. You are always communicating something, even in silence. And what you communicate most deeply is not your words, but your state of being formed through repeated inner conversations. To change outer reflection, you do not start by forcing others to behave differently. You start by noticing how you are speaking to them internally. Are you repeating stories of rejection, confusion, or distance? Or are you sustaining a version of them and yourself that reflects the connection you desire? When you intentionally shift your inner dialogue, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. Your emotional state changes. Your expectations shift. Your presence softens or strengthens depending on the new story you are holding. And over time, this change is reflected back to you through the behavior of others and the unfolding of circumstances. Your inner dialogue is therefore not just thought, it is creative direction. It is the private language of reality formation. What you repeatedly say within becomes the atmosphere others feel around you. And when this is fully understood, you begin to treat your inner speech with care, because you realize that every internal conversation is not disappearing into nothing. It is becoming something. It is becoming the reflection you later meet in the world. Your outer reality is not separate from your inner dialogue. It is its echo, its mirror, and its delayed expression. And when the inner conversation changes, the reflection has no choice but to follow. This statement reveals one of the deepest principles of inner creation. Nothing becomes real in experience without being felt first. Thought alone is incomplete. Imagination alone is only a picture. But when imagination is joined with feeling, when it is lived internally with emotional intensity, it becomes a living impression upon the subconscious mind. The subconscious does not respond to logic, argument, or external proof. It responds to experience. And the most powerful experience is the one created within. When you imagine a scene and actually feel it as real, the joy, the relief, the satisfaction, the certainty, you are no longer simply thinking. You are imprinting. Feeling is the language the subconscious understands. It does not analyze whether something is possible or impossible. It simply accepts the emotional reality that is repeatedly impressed upon it. This is why two people can think the same thought, but only the one who feels it deeply begins to see it reflected in their outer world. Imagination gives direction, but feeling gives power. Without feeling, imagination remains distant and inactive, But with feeling, imagination becomes a lived experience. The subconscious then treats that experience as something already true and begins to reorganize behavior, perception, and opportunity to match it. This is why inner states matter more than external circumstances. Circumstances are not the starting point, they are the result. The real cause is always the state you inhabit internally, and that state is defined not only by what you think, but by what you feel consistently. When you combine imagination and emotion intentionally, you are no longer reacting to life. You are participating in its creation. You begin to notice that your inner scenes carry weight. A simple imagined moment, when felt deeply, can shift your entire sense of identity. And when identity shifts, experience must follow. This is not about forcing emotions artificially. It is about choosing a scene in imagination and gently stepping into it as if it is already true. You feel the natural emotion that would exist if it were real, not exaggerated, not forced, but accepted. That feeling becomes the signal. Over time, your subconscious begins to accept this inner experience as your default reality. And once accepted, it expresses itself through thoughts, behaviors, decisions, and external events that align with it. Feeling, therefore, is not a secondary effect, it is the creative bridge. It connects imagination to manifestation. It takes what is unseen and gives it life within the mind until the outer world eventually mirrors it. And when this principle is fully understood, you begin to see that nothing is neutral. Every feeling is shaping something. Every emotional state is building something. You are always impressing the subconscious, whether consciously or unconsciously. So the question is no longer what do I want, but rather what am I feeling as true right now? Because what is felt as real, even in imagination, becomes the blueprint that reality follows. To feeling is the quiet force behind all creation, invisible, constant, and always shaping the next version of your lived experience. This idea points to a simple but often overlooked truth. You are never neutral in life. At every moment, you are occupying a specific identity, a specific inner role. That role might be conscious or unconscious, chosen or habitual, empowering or limiting, but it is always active. And whatever role you embody becomes the lens through which life responds to you. A role is not just behavior, it is a state of being. It includes how you see yourself, how you expect others to treat you, and what you believe is natural for you to experience. For example, someone embodying the role of uncertainty will naturally move through life expecting confusion and hesitation. Someone embodying the role of confidence will expect clarity and direction. Even before external proof appears, life responds less to what you want and more to what you are being. This is because being is the deeper instruction. Desire alone does not reshape experience. Identity does. When you consistently inhabit a version of yourself internally, your perception, choices, and emotional responses begin to align with that version. And through that alignment, your outer world starts to shift accordingly. Changing the role means changing the inner script. It means asking, who am I being right now in my imagination, my thoughts, and my reactions? Because that who is what is being expressed outwardly. If you are embodying someone who is waiting, life reflects waiting. If you are embodying someone who is already chosen, life begins to reflect confirmation. The scene of your life is not fixed. It is continuously reconstructed through the version of you that you occupy moment by moment. When you change your internal role, you change how you interpret everything. The same message, the same interaction, the same circumstance can take on an entirely different meaning depending on the identity you are embodying. This is why transformation is not about forcing external change. It is about internal substitution. You replace the role of lack with the role of fulfillment. You replace the role of doubt with the role of certainty. You replace the role of separation with the role of connection. And as you persist in that new role, your inner reactions begin to stabilize around it. At first, external reality may not immediately reflect the change, but that is only because the outer world is echoing older roles that were previously embodied. Persistence in the new role is what allows the old pattern to dissolve. Over time, the new identity becomes more natural, and what once felt like imagination begins to feel like truth. This is how the scene of life changes, not through struggle but through embodiment. You do not chase a new life, you step into a new version of yourself, and life reorganizes around that shift. When this understanding deepens, you begin to see every moment as an opportunity to choose your role consciously, not as performance but as identity, not as pretending but as being. And in that realization, life stops feeling like something happening to you. It starts feeling like something unfolding from you, shaped by the role you are willing to embody and sustain within yourself. This statement reveals one of the most powerful principles of inner transformation. What you see today is not a verdict, it is a reflection. It is not the end of a story, but a snapshot of what has already been accepted within you over time. And because it is a reflection, it can never be more permanent than the state that created it. Most people give authority to appearances. They assume that what is visible is what is fixed, but appearances are not origins, they are echoes. They are the result of repeated inner assumptions, repeated feelings, and repeated identity states that have solidified into form. What you experience right now is not random. It is history unfolding, not destiny being decided. This is why persistence is so important. Persistence is the act of holding a new inner assumption, even when the outer world has not yet caught up. It is the refusal to let temporary reflection define permanent belief. Without persistence, the old assumption continues to dominate. With persistence, a new assumption begins to take root and overwrite the previous pattern. When you change your inner state, you do not immediately erase the old reflection. The outer world has momentum. It takes time for the new inner direction to express itself outwardly. This delay often causes doubt. People see unchanged circumstances and assume nothing is working. But in truth, change is already in motion. It is simply not visible yet. Think of reality like a mirror. If you change your expression in the mirror, the reflection changes instantly. But if the mirror is delayed, you might still see your old expression for a moment. That delay does not mean your expression has not changed. It only means the reflection has not updated yet. Persistence is continuing to hold the new expression until the mirror catches up. This is why current reality must be understood as a memory, not a prophecy. It is a record of what you previously believed, felt, and accepted. It is not predicting what will happen next. It is showing what was already assumed. Once this is understood, you stop reacting to appearances as if they are instructions. Instead, you begin to see them as feedback. Persistence is not force, it is continuity. It is returning again and again to the inner state you choose, regardless of what appears outside. It is saying within yourself, this is still true for me, even when nothing external confirms it yet. And over time, that inner stability becomes stronger than external noise. Eventually, the outer world has no choice but to adjust. Not because you forced it, but because you remained consistent long enough for the new pattern to replace the old one. The persistence of your inner state becomes the bridge between imagination and manifestation. And when this understanding becomes embodied, you stop measuring progress by what you see. You start measuring it by what you are being. You realize that nothing external is final, because everything external is still in motion, still responding, still catching up. Persistence is what transforms imagination into experience. It is the quiet power that overrides appearances, dissolves doubt, and allows a new reality to emerge from within, until the mirror finally reflects what you never stopped becoming. This principle points to a subtle but profound shift in consciousness. You are no longer moving toward a desire as something missing, but moving from the state of having it already. Most people live from the position of not yet, constantly aware of lack, distance, and delay. But living from the end means you step out of that waiting state and enter the inner experience of completion. The end is not a future event. It is a state of fulfillment. It is the internal moment where the desire is no longer desired because it is already assumed as true. In that state, there is no striving, no questioning, no emotional reaching. There is only quiet certainty, the natural feeling of it is done. To live from this end state is to use imagination differently. Instead of imagining something as a distant possibility, you imagine it as your current reality. You see yourself already being, already having, already experiencing what you once hoped for. And more importantly, you feel it as normal, not dramatic, not forced, but settled. This inner shift changes everything, because consciousness always expresses itself outwardly. When you persist in living from fulfillment internally, your thoughts begin to align with that fulfillment. Your reactions change. Your expectations change. Even your perception of external events begins to shift because you are no longer interpreting life from the lens of lack. Living from the end also means releasing dependence on evidence. Evidence belongs to the old state. If you require constant proof before you feel secure, you remain trapped in waiting. But when you assume fulfillment first, evidence becomes a result, not a requirement. It follows the state you consistently occupy. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means not being defined by it. You can observe circumstances without surrendering your inner assumption. You can see delay without accepting delay as identity. The inner state remains primary, and outer conditions are treated as temporary reflections still adjusting. In practical terms, living from the end is a continuous return to the feeling of completion. When doubt appears, you do not negotiate with it. You return to the version of you who already has it. When circumstances contradict it, you do not reinterpret yourself. You remain rooted in the fulfilled state. Over time, this creates a psychological and emotional stability. You stop oscillating between hope and disappointment. You begin to feel anchored in a reality that is not yet visible but already accepted within. And that inner acceptance becomes the creative force shaping your experience. The shift is simple in idea but powerful in effect. You are no longer trying to get something from life, you are expressing something from within. You are not asking the world to change, you are embodying the version of yourself in which it already has. And as this embodiment deepens, life begins to reorganize itself around your inner certainty. Events align, people respond differently, opportunities emerge. Not because you chase them, but because you change the state from which you are living. In the end, living from the end is not imagination escaping reality, it is imagination becoming the source of reality. And when this is fully understood, the wish is no longer a wish. It is a fact already alive within you, waiting only for time to reveal what consciousness has already accepted as done. In conclusion, all of these principles point to one simple truth. Your inner world is the origin of your outer experience. What you assume, what you repeatedly think, what you feel, what you embody, and what you persist in, all of it quietly shapes the reality you live in. You are not a passive observer of life. You are constantly participating in its creation through your state of being. When you change your assumption, you change the seed. When you change your inner dialogue, you change the reflection. When you change your feeling, you change the impression. When you change the role you embody, you change the scene. And when you persist in a new state, appearances eventually follow. Living from the end is the final alignment, where you no longer wait, doubt, or chase, but internally accept fulfillment as already done. From that place, everything begins to reorganize itself naturally. So the real work is not forcing life, but directing consciousness, not reacting to appearances, but choosing states, not waiting for proof, but persisting in inner certainty until the outer world reflects it. Everything begins within, and everything returns to it. Thank you.